Good on you, Ruben. Let's go. Joining us now, Sky News Australia Chief Election Analyst Tom Connell. He loves this stuff. Tom, can you just give me and the audience a breakdown of what it will take for each of the major parties to form government in their own right, if that is even possible?
It's certainly possible. It's just very unlikely because of the current polling. If we look at where the parliament is at right now on the cusp of this election, you can see Labor with a very slim majority here. So they need 76 seats. Essentially what needs to happen is they need to just not lose more than 2. If we bring up that graphic, we can see that. And the coalition need to essentially win 20 seats, give or take. Now, when we talk about what happens at elections, we do have, and we generally talk about so-called uniform swing. So we're assuming that the swing just goes right the way, same right across the country. And if that happens, you pick up X number of seats. We know things don't always work out that well, Steve, but that's the sort of assumption we need to make. Now, someone can tell me if we're having an issue bringing up some of the information, because I feel as though it's a little bit hard to sort of digest without the information. But so the current state of the House has, here we go. Well, I'll talk to this. So you saw the state of the House on Ruben's package. So the crossbench, this is the big thing. This is why there's so much talk about minority. 2010 crossbench, the last time there was a minority, Steve, it was an absolute razor edge. It was basically 50-50. Because there was only 5 on the crossbench, it had to be that tight. This time around, we have a crossbench of 16 in 2022. So if they all stay there, if they stay intact, they could grow, they could shrink, but if they stay there, Labor needs at least, on the uniform swing, 51.4% of two-party preferred. The coalition, as you see, needs nearly 54%. So any swing of even 1% against Labor, and they're set to get a swing at the moment of 2 or 3, means they don't get majority. And the swing towards the coalition needs to be 6, so about double what it is right now. Now, things can change if the Greens lose 2 or 3. Well, then that narrows the amount that both sides win. If teal seats go to the coalition, the amount of swing they need is less. But that just shows, because at the moment, the crossbench, in all the contests except 2 Green seats, the crossbench is favourite to keep their seats. So if we assume it's a pretty similar number, that just paints the picture for why we're talking about a likely minority government. Things could change. There might be a late rush to the so-called favourite party at that point to win the most seats. But for now, that's been pretty stuck, that polling, and that suggests we are headed for minority.
Tom, what makes elections so fascinating is, I mean, depending upon where you live, the mood is always slightly different, and Sky's got assets in each state, and so we're going to be able to keep people up to date on that. Living here in Victoria, I mean, the Labor brand, and you have been talking about this during the day, it's busted here in Victoria. I mean, you know, there are a number of seats up for grabs here, but also you talk about those teals, Kooyong and Goldstein. I think they go back to the Liberals. I mean, I can't see Monique Ryan. That poster ripping down exercise by her husband didn't help. And I think Tim Wilson in Goldstein, he's been the former member there, and he's been running a campaign basically for the entire 3 years that the government's been in. What do you make of those 2 teal seats there, and what other seats could potentially in Victoria go to the coalition?
Yeah. I'll take you through the sort of picture briefly. So nationwide, the most likely seats, at least on margin, for the coalition to pick up. They do have some targets right across the country. So if we bring up what we've got here, there are seats across the country. I mean, Curtin's a teal seat. The rest of them are Labor seats, except those Greens ones. So there are lots of different contests, as you just spoke about, Steve. WA, huge swing to Labor last time. It's going to come back, but the margins are so big, it's unlikely they'll get more than 2 or 3 of the coalition. In Queensland, the coalition's at such a high watermark. It's Brisbane and Ryan, the most likely ones they win, but Brisbane could actually be a Labor pickup. Boothby pretty tight. McEwen and Chisholm around Victoria ones, and we've got Patterson, Robertson in New South Wales, Lingiar in the NT. So they've got targets all over the country that are perfectly gettable with this, on average, 3% swing. I think where it gets really interesting, you talked there about Victorian vulnerabilities. What's interesting here is you alluded to the Labor brand. It is very poor in Victoria right now. So the uniform swing in Victoria, on those numbers, the Liberal Party gets no seats. Well, we think it will be much bigger in Victoria than 3%. What does that bring into play? Look, Aston's almost a certain Liberal gain. That was the one, of course, the Labor Party won in that by-election. That's basically gone. Chisholm may be favourites in. The rest, McEwen slight favourite to the Liberal Party, but the rest is really going to depend how big this swing is, and note where they are. These are the outer suburbs. This is part of the Peter Dutton strategy. Even think of something like the fuel cut, the fuel excise cut. These are people out in the suburbs. These seats, including Bruce, have many more people with 3 cars or more. They will care more about that. So Victoria is going to be a huge part of the election when we think of that. And I think there's another part of this, Steve. When you win almost this one too many elections, and by that I mean you probably would have lost with a good opposition, but you win, often you really get whacked afterwards. Think of the last state election in Victoria, Liberal Party didn't have their act together. The last federal election in 2019, that one Scott Morrison maybe shouldn't have won because they were on the nose. They did win and then they got whacked afterwards. So I think there's an element of that now in Victoria. When you spoke about those teal seats, we'll bring up the options, the margins, if you like. Look, the 2 ones in Victoria, I think, are the most likely to go, particularly Goldstein. This is a broad map, but Goldstein's a little bit further out. So we think of Climate Back 200 independents. The real gold for them is closer to the city. Goldstein's a little bit further out. So I think that, there is a big chance the Liberal Party pick up Goldstein. I'm less certain about Kooyong. What's interesting is Mackellar is another one like Goldstein that's just a little bit further out. This was the 2-party preferred. Now, this is one poll. We're always wary of one-seat polls, Steve, but still, that's a very significant turnaround. And the thing about these seats, you saw margins of 3%, 4%. It's very different to a Labor-Liberal 3-4%. You need quite a bit of change for that to happen. In these seats, the independents won with primaries of 30 or so %. You don't need much change for that primary to shift around for that equation to change. It's a little bit different to that traditional Labor-Liberal contest when you're talking about a primary that's in the very low 30s for the independents. So they'll all be a watch. I think if there's an order of how they go, I'd probably say Goldstein, Curtin, then Kooyong. New South Wales seems to be holding up better at the moment, albeit there's still likely to be some swings up there for the independent seats.
Good stuff, Tom. I look forward to your intel right through the election campaign. Good luck over the next 5 weeks. That's Tom Connell there now. Peter Dutton held his first election campaign media conference. That was in Brisbane just before lunchtime, basically reiterating his budget in reply speech from last night. And when asked about being framed as Australia's Donald Trump, he had a slap, as he should have, at the PM.